Hi, today I'm going to share with you our results on the framing of LGBT in online Malaysian newspapers. There was a spike of interest in LGBT news and issues in Malaysia in the year 2019. And this is probably an outcome of more openness towards LGBT in the region. Right now, 25 countries have recognized LGBT marriages. And closer to home, same-sex marriages have been legalized in Australia and Taiwan. In Malaysia, the official stance on same-sex marriage is it is not acceptable. An example here is a decision from the Rulers Conference in 1989 that prohibits LGBT from being practiced as a lifestyle because it violates religious principles, the lifestyle of the Eastern society, and human nature. However, on the ground, LGBT are coming into the open. Here I give you just 3 examples. In 2018, a transgender representative met a minister to request non-discrimination of LGBT people in Malaysia. Right now, there's also a pro-LGBT organization called Sexuality Merdeka that hopes to promote recognition of LGBT struggles. And in the year 2019, LGBT individuals participated in a rally during the World Women's Day in Kuala Lumpur, and this attracted a lot of attention. Now, what about media coverage of LGBT? From my search of the literature, little is known about how LGBT is framed in Malaysian newspapers. However, studies in Indonesia have shown that LGBT issues are often sensationalized, and LGBT people are portrayed negatively, such as being sadistic, inclined towards committing violence, going against religion, and practicing homosexuality as a choice. Now, the studies on the media coverage of LGBT has also revealed that there are 2 main influences on the coverage. One is the ideological stance of the media and the journalists' open-mindedness, and of course taking into account the societal context. If it is a Muslim country like Malaysia, there will be more sensitivity on the issue of LGBT. The aim of our study is to examine framing of LGBT in 4 online newspapers in Malaysia. The specific objectives of the study were to determine the percentage of thematic and episodic framing of LGBT, as well as topics and subtopics that are covered in the LGBT news. Method of the study: we conducted a descriptive study of LGBT articles in 4 newspapers: Malaysia Kini, The Star Online, Free Malaysia Today, and Astro Awani Online. Altogether, 60 articles were found published on LGBT in the year 2019. Now, the instrument we use for analyzing episodic and thematic framing is taken from Iyengar 1990 and 1991. Episodic news frame means that the news are reported on specific individuals or events, whereas thematic framing are like TV documentaries that touches on the issue in the broader context. As for our data collection and analysis procedures, we started by using the keyword LGBT in the newspaper websites. And all those articles that were brought out were downloaded, copied, and pasted, and then we checked for relevance of the articles. The unit of analysis was the whole news article. Therefore, the whole news article was read to identify the dominant frame, whether it was episodic or thematic. As for the topics, for each article, the main topics were identified and then they were grouped by themes and sub-themes were found. And this was presented in the form of a concept map. Finally, a chi-square goodness of fit test was conducted to find out whether the 4 newspapers were different in these 2 aspects: episodic framing and thematic framing, and topics on LGBT. Here are the results of our study. Right, firstly, episodic and thematic framing on LGBT. out of the 60 articles published, we found that most of them were on episodic framing, the most being in Astra Awani Online. This is a newspaper attached to a paid TV channel in Malaysia. 91.67% of the articles were episodic framed. And then among the 4 articles, Malaysia Kini has slightly less episodic framing than the rest at 72.73%. So conversely, of course, Malaysia Kini has more articles which were thematically framed. Now, Malaysia Kini is an alternative newspaper. The same goes for Free Malaysia Today, which is also an alternative newspaper. But the Star Online is a mainstream newspaper. So as you can see here, the articles in Astra Awani is the one that is mostly episodically framed, whereas in Malaysia Kini, there are more thematic frames now. However, when we run the chi-square test, it was found that there was no significant difference between the 4 newspapers. They were highly inclined towards episodic framing of LGBT news. Second part of our results, the topics in the LGBT news. Here in the chart, you can see the percentage of local and foreign news. You will see that the Star Online, the mainstream newspaper here, had more foreign news on LGBT. But Malaysia Kini, the alternative newspaper, has more local news on LGBT. The other 2 newspapers had a balanced representation or coverage of LGBT news. By that, I'm referring to Free Malaysia Today and Astra Awani. Now, the local news were mostly on 2 events happening in 2019. One is the Women's Day March in Kuala Lumpur, and the other one is Malaysia's non-support for the International Labour Organization Global Treaty. Those are the 2 main events covered in the LGBT news locally. But as for foreign news, there is more variety of topics, as you will see next. But here, I just want to let you know that this time when we run the chi-square test, there were significant differences between the 4 newspapers, as you could see just now in the bar graph. Now, here, figure 1 shows us the main topics covered on local LGBT news. Salient events, the 2 events I told you just now, but there was one incident where a gay man was caught by immigration. And there were also issues. The 2 main issues were the portrayal of LGBT elements in Netflix and also companies supporting LGBT. And of course, all these news articles have views on LGBT expressed mostly by politicians, religious leaders, and activists. Next, the topics in foreign LGBT news. You will see that there are only 3 main topics. One is the criminalization of LGBT, which is sometimes covered in the local news because LGBT is prohibited in Malaysia. So there is this talk about death, jail for same-sex marriages, and so on. And then in the foreign news, there is somewhat a balance of reporting on societal discrimination of LGBT versus support for LGBT. When we talk about societal discrimination, they talk about LGBT being treated as abnormal people in job applications. There was concern expressed about children being photographed with LGBT people and the Instagram showing a Muslim gay man. Now, on the other side, the support for LGBT examples are the Emmy Awards for LGBTQ in 2019, and also actor was criticized for being homophobic. So these are some examples. All right, we've come to the discussion of the findings. Our study has actually found some very interesting observations on the framing of a morally and religiously sensitive issue in mainstream and alternative newspaper in Malaysia. Firstly, LGBT was not represented as a salient issue, as indicated by the fact that there were only 60 articles found in the year 2019 from 4 newspapers. Now, next, secondly, there is a dominance of episodic framing of LGBT articles in the 4 newspapers, 72% to 92%. What does this mean? When there are episodic frames on LGBT, it is very likely that the readers will get more emotionally involved in the issue because it is about specific events and people. And since the media coverage of LGBT is inclined to be negative, that means people are being influenced to develop negative views towards LGBT people. So conversely, thematic framing of LGBT experiences will give them a fair representation according to Morrison et al. 2020. Third and finally, our study showed that the newspapers differed in the proportion of local and foreign LGBT news. Interestingly, it is the mainstream newspaper, the Star Online, that had the most foreign news on LGBT. And this means that the readership will be exposed to more multidimensional perspective on LGBT. So although the foreign news also covered negative aspects on LGBT, there were more articles highlighting human rights and societal acceptance of LGBT. So in conclusion, we have attempted to cover both mainstream and alternative newspapers, but our findings, of course, are limited by the small spectrum of newspapers chosen for analysis. Future research should examine a bigger selection of newspapers to find out if the selection of the topics on LGBT actually varies with the targeted readership. And in addition, a very important aspect of the news articles that should be studied is the balance or the tone. And then this should be examined in relation to the voices that are quoted to support or to reject LGBT across different segments of the society. With that, I end my presentation. If you have any questions, please contact me at this email address given. Thank you.